Okay, good evening. How are you? Fine. So we will be covering the current affairs for environment and ecology portion for the last week of December. Okay. So firstly, we will see what are all things that are in the news. Okay. So the first topic that we have is about the Aravali Hills. Okay.
Recording in progress.
So we have things about Aravali Hills. Okay, Aravali Hills has been in the news, right? Aravali Hills is basically there because what is the reason? Yes, it is because Supreme Court has brought in a definition. It has utilized a definition that says that Aravali Hills would be something. Just a second. Yes, Aravali Hills would be defined whichever hills have been more than 100 meters. Okay, and also it will talk about two things. One would be the Aravali Hills, and the other thing is Aravali Ranges. Okay, we have definition with respect to both of them. One would be when we are understanding Aravali Hills, we are saying that the scientific definition is that any of the hill that has greater than 100-meter height. Okay, greater than 100-meter height respect to what? With respect to the local terrains. Okay, local relief. Okay, so any kind of hill that has more than 100 meters of height as compared to the local terrain, that would be considered to be Aravali Hill. And with respect to Aravali Ranges, any hill, any two hills which have a distance of 500 meters between them, that will be considered as Aravali Range, which means that even the area between them would be under conservation, right? So this definition created a lot of controversy, right? And therefore, what has it resulted into? It has resulted into various kinds of concerns. Okay, concerns that the part that you're excluding, okay, with respect to this definition, there is some inclusion and some exclusions. So whatever exclusion are there, there is a result of mining activities. Okay, it will lead to mining in these zones. Okay, so this is the whole issue, right? So let us learn about it. So first of all, Aravali Ranges, it is the oldest mountain systems. Okay, it is ancient in nature. Okay, how did it form? It formed due to the collision of plates. Okay, ancient plates collided, and therefore it was a result of Aravali Ranges. And it is not, it is not the original one. It is the remnants. Okay, through various process of weathering, physical weathering, chemical weathering, have reduced these. Okay, so you have the highest peak here is Guru Shikhar peak, that is 1722. Okay, and the geographical location is, it runs from Gujarat, Rajasthan, has presence in Haryana and Delhi as well, right? 800 kilometers, right? So with respect to these concerns, we have seen that there is a currently campaign going on that goes by #SaveAravali campaign, right? Okay. Moving forward, understanding the definition that Supreme Court has led in its ruling. Okay, so this uniform scientific definition. Okay, earlier the problem was that there is no scientific definition. Okay, every state is applying its own knowledge about Aravalis, and therefore, with respect to each understanding, there is variations in identifying what constitute the Aravalis. Okay, and when you have problems in identifying, there will be problems in conserving as well, right? So different states will conserve in a different manner, right? So first of all, Supreme Court solved this by saying that I have a committee which has recommended that the definition must be uniform. Okay, so that the states are not able to apply as per their own flexibility conditions. Okay, they are not going to give mining leases to the people of interests. Okay, so it was under Ministry of Environmental Community, and they are defined as landforms rising 100 meters or more above the surrounding local terrain. Okay, while Aravali ranges consist of clusters of two or more such hills within 500 meters of each other. 500 meters. Okay, if I have two hills, then if this is a distance of 500, means that this portion is also going to be conserved. This is not going to lie out of the conservation zone. So the court has implemented a calibrated approach. Okay, earlier the approach used to be banning. Okay, so we have moved from what we call as the blanket ban. Okay, that suppose you say that mining leases are completely banned in Aravali ranges, right? We have moved from blanket ban to having a calibrated approach. That is, we are trying to analyze what all portions are important from ecological point of view. Okay, what all hills are required, what all ranges are required, and where we can have mining. Okay, this is a core concept of sustainable development. We are talking about both economic viability as well as environmental conservation, right? So calibrated approach rather than blanket bans, it directed a temporary pause on new mining leases. Okay, so it has done two things. One is the new mining leases are banned for a temporary period, and with respect to the ones that are already existing, there would be operations would be under strict regulation, right? This temporary ban has been temporary. Why? Because they want ICFRE, that is Indian Council of Forest Research and Education, to come up with a plan, okay, to come up with a comprehensive mapping that where we can go for mining, where we can go for conservation, where we should have no mining at all. So that plan is called Management Plan for Sustainable Mining. Until and unless this kind of a mapping comes into play, there is no mining leases that are going to be there. New mining leases I'm talking about, not the existing ones. Okay, so 100-meter height threshold, these are the scientific definition. 500-meter clustering, the distance between the hills, and temporary moratorium, that means ban on new leases, right? Going forward, understanding decades of conservation efforts and policy evolution. Okay, why did this need of definition arose in the first place, right? In the 1990s, we had initial restrictions, but these restrictions were very political in nature. Okay, and they were also very spread out. They were not uniform, and that is why it led to non-compliance and continued illegal mining activities. Okay, even while the first mining restrictions were there were non-compliance. That is, the mining industry was not compliant with the violations, right? The second thing is 2002, Rajasthan comes out with the definition. It is quite similar to the definition that Supreme Court has ruled out, right? So Rajasthan comes out, it becomes, because we have how many states within Aravali? We have Haryana, we have Delhi, we have Rajasthan, and we have Gujarat. These four states, out of these four states, only Rajasthan came out with the definition. Okay, it came out with a definition based on landform classification establishing 100-meter threshold and prohibiting mining on hills and slopes. Okay, but again the problem arose that there is not uniformity in governance. Okay, ecological governance is not there. 2009, Supreme Court ban, but only in certain areas of Gurugram. Okay, Faridabad, Gurugram, and Mewat districts of Haryana, right? Then comes Central Empowered Committee, that is in 2024. It recommends, okay, the recommending of comprehensive scientific mapping across all states. So this is the first move when we are talking about all states. The recommendation by Central Empowered Committee. Earlier it was first only Rajasthan, then we had in parts of Haryana, that was through the Supreme Court ban. Now it has been recommended that it should be uniform across all the states, because we are trying to understand Aravali's as ecological continuity and not in isolated regions of the states, right? 2024, we come up with Aravali Green Wall. Okay, Aravali Green Wall is something that is similar to Africa's Green Wall. Okay, it is 1400 kilometers of ecological restoration program targeting restoration of 1.1 million hectares by 2027. Okay, across 4 states. So how does it run? This is going to be your Aravali Green Wall. Okay, it is 1400 kilometers plus 5 kilometers wide. Okay, it is going to range from Gujarat to your Panipat in Haryana, right? Porbandar in Gujarat to Panipat, right? Okay, Aravali is something that is very important from the point of view of desertification also. Okay, because it eliminates the process of desertification. That is, the Thar desert that lies to the left of it is something that can spread. Okay, and it can cause huge amount of problems with respect to water security also, right? In the parts of Delhi, in the parts of Haryana. Okay, these are already arid regions, and that can have deteriorating effect on agriculture. Okay, so it is important that we conserve Aravalis and also strengthen it through Aravali green wall, right? Now, what are the concerns? First of all, as we had talked about, there is massive landscape exclusion. Okay, from what we are including, we are including 100 meters plus 500 meters between hills. Okay, these are your Aravali ranges. These are your Aravali hills. Rest, what about the rest? It is excluded, right? So Forest Survey of India says that 100-meter threshold excludes over 90% of Aravali system from legal protection. It means only 10%, while we are saying that this is a scientific definition, but it covers only 10% of total Aravalis. That means that it is a very isolated approach in which we are covering Aravalis. Only we have 90% that is away from the legal protection. That means it is exposed. That means it is vulnerable to the mining operators. So this dramatic exclusion leaves vast stretches of ecologically vital foothills, valleys, and connecting ridges vulnerable to exploitation and degradation, right? The second thing is ignoring ecological continuity. Okay, as we talked about that, we are just going for isolated patchwork of conservation strategies, right? It will function as a continuous interconnected ecological system. Okay, the peak centric, that means we are just talking about 100 meters. It will overlook the crucial role of lower elevations that support biodiversity, corridors, groundwater recharge, and watershed management. Okay, even the Aravalis will have watershed management because it has considerable amount of biodiversity when it comes to plants, right? So it will also help to, if you go about mining in these zones, the water level will drop, whether it is the groundwater, whether it is the recharge of water table, all of this will fall. There will be water scarcity in these zones. Then groundwater crisis, okay, the rainwater percolation. It is a critical zone for rainwater percolation, and that will also stop. Desertification threat, as I have talked about, desertification threat that the Thar desert will start spreading towards the eastern part as well, right? Now, just because Aravalis are in news, therefore they can ask you about the Aravali ranges itself. Okay, so it is something. It is very ancient. Started in 2000 million years ago and pre-Cambrian era, right? It is one of the Earth's oldest mountain, and you have Guru Shikhar Peak, that is the highest. Okay, 1722 meters. This is something that you should keep in mind. Okay, and it acts as a natural barrier, that is, it prevents desertification. Then it is also a biodiversity hotspot and a water source. Okay, it supports what kind of forest? Dry deciduous forest, grasslands and wetlands. Okay, houses 22 wildlife sanctuaries, 3 tiger reserves, and provides habitat for endangered species, right? So 800-kilometer total range length. Okay, we are trying to have Aravali green wall that is of 1400 kilometers, and it is 2000 million years old. It has 22 wildlife sanctuaries and 70 plus minerals. So we are talking about ecology. Okay, we are first talking about the environment in which it is sustained. This is the environment, this is your conservation of biodiversity, and this is your economics, right? And we are talking about how do I manage all of these things in the sustainable developmental principle, right? Okay, so what should be the path forward? Okay, first of all, mapping, scientific mapping must be there. I must understand beyond the 90%, that is, I'm talking about 90%, this much space that has been excluded, there must be a scientific management for these. Okay, and that will exist only if I map it properly, when I understand it through various kinds of environmental impact assessment as well as social impact assessment, right? So identify hills, ranges, slopes, valleys, recharge zones and wildlife corridors. Okay, and therefore we will have only graded risk-based controls on mining with clear criteria for prohibition, where you have to go for complete ban, regulation where you can allow some of it, and where you will monitor it, you will have it under control, right? So this kind of mapping and risk assessment must be there. Okay, that is the purpose of having MSPM, right? That is what that is why Supreme Court has said that we will have a temporary ban on new leases, okay, until this kind of a mapping is done. This part here, management plan for sustainable mining, management plan for sustainable mining. Okay, sustainable mining, whenever the word sustainable comes, understand that it has to be concordant with three things. One is society, other is environment, and then economics. Okay, management plan for sustainable mining. Okay, so here we have ecosystem restoration programs, promote restoration of degraded forest. Okay, whatever degradation has happened up until now, there must be a constant effort, especially for example like green wall. Okay, that there must be restoration so that all kinds of ecology can continue. Okay, then technology enhanced enforcement, like we should have technology, it is not always possible. Why was there non-compliance in early 1990s? Okay, that was because there was no proper enforcement. Okay, now we are technologically enabled and therefore we can have more enhanced enforcement. We can have drones, we can have satellite imagery, we can have CCTV networks, we can have e-challans. Okay, and even the deployment of district task force, right? Desertification control measures, deploy surface vegetation. Okay, surface vegetation, there are some plants that will help in increasing the amount of moisture retention in the soil, right? So these are Calegonum and Acacia to stabilize the dunes and reduce wind erosions, right? Right, so these are the important things. And one more thing, that it is going to, when we are going to restore this Aravalli ecosystem, it is important for us from the climate change point of view, from Paris Agreement, from Bonn Challenge and land degradation neutrality as well. Okay, we are talking about land degradation. Okay, land degradation is a serious threat to us. Why? Because it will decrease what? The fertility of the soil. And in effect, if the fertility of soil is reduced, then our food security is also threatened, right? Okay. Now moving on to the next part. Okay. So we have human-wildlife conflict in India. Okay, human-wildlife conflict in India. The recent case is that there was a tragic train-elephant collision. Okay, why does human-wildlife conflict occur? We have high population of elephants, or we could say we have high population of wildlife. Okay, now they are also competing because we are having urbanization. Okay, there is continuous deforestation, urbanization. So basically there are resources and these resources are being in competition with respect to human as well as the wildlife. So this means that there would be points where it would be creating a conflict. That is, one would be trying to eliminate the other, right? So earlier what used to happen, elephant can roam around. Okay, they would have, they are, they will travel hundreds of kilometers. 150 to 300 kilometers, right? So this means that this kind of a travel, this kind of a migration is not just for, tourism purpose by the elephant. It is because it needs to migrate. Okay, there has to be effective gene pooling. Okay, otherwise if they are isolated in island habitats, okay, in small habitats, then there would be possible cases of interbreeding, okay, which can cause various kinds of accumulation of diseases, okay, that can threaten the conservation efforts, right? So there is a need to move. It is also a social animal, okay, there has to be seasonal migration, there has to be migration for reproductive purposes also, right? And what happens is that when we have these kind of pressing demands on environment, then we reduce their habitats to small isolated patches, okay, and then we say, okay, let us have their isolated patches, these are their isolated patches, and we connect them, okay, we try to connect all of this. So these are your wildlife corridors. Wildlife corridors are something that are providing for linkage between the different protection networks. Okay, these are protected areas where the habitat of animal is there. Yes, but it has to move. I know, I understand the migration process. Therefore, I am providing for wildlife corridors. These are very narrow corridors which will connect one protected area to the other protected area, right? And these will have the necessary resources required for them. Okay, required for their livelihood, right? But it is being seen that even these wildlife corridors as well as the protected areas, they are not very sufficient, okay, and therefore they are moving outside. They are moving outside these protected area networks and wildlife corridors, and there is a constant conflict between humans and wildlife. Okay, so as the news reads, the incident has occurred outside a designated elephant corridor, exposing critical gaps in wildlife movement mapping and preventive infrastructure. It is raising a question that whether we had the protected area network, we had the wildlife corridor, still if such kind of incidents arise, then what is the step forward, right? We wanted human wildlife coexistence, but this is going against our plans, okay? So understanding how grave the matter actually is, okay? Just like we have road accidents, we understand how many accidents have happened, and then it gives us an understanding that what should be done to prevent it. Okay. Similarly, in understanding this human-wildlife conflict between elephants and humans, 2,700 human deaths. This has happened in the last 5 years when we take the data from 2019 to 2024. Okay, and within this time, these many tiger-related fatalities have happened. That means tiger and human-related conflict, right? And it is being said if it continues up until this like this, then by 2070 we would be the global hotspot for human-wildlife conflict, right? So this brings us to a concern and understanding that how can humans and wildlife coexist. Okay, understand this, that people are not very forgiving, because if animals, if they destroy their lives, if they destroy their crops, if they destroy their homes, then people come out with revenge. Okay, they will kill the animals, right? So this conflict will continue and we have to stop that. Okay, and one of the great ways of stopping that is community participation. That is, the community itself tries to conserve it, right? So it is not just about the physical attacks, it is about the competition for space and resources. Okay, we have learned in biotic interactions about competition. If there is a competition, then both of the biotic components will be harmed, right? So if there is a competition, but if we have collaboration, then it would be a better way forward, right? You understand human wildlife conflict? It means that negative impacts would be there on human, social, economic or cultural life and wildlife population and the environment. Okay, all of these things will be affected. Now, what is the root cause? driving the conflict. One is habitat loss and fragmentation. Okay, I was providing, understand this, that we had a wildlife that had this much area. Okay, so elephants could roam about in all of these areas, but then I started having human settlements. This is human settlement. This is again human settlement. Okay, this is again human settlement. Okay, and this is a road. This is a road. This means that the protected areas are limited to these few. This is a protected area, this is a protected area, this is a protected area, and we have wildlife corridors. We connect these wildlife corridors. Okay, so these become the islands in which the elephants are limited. So this means this is what habitat fragmentation is. That I have fragmented the whole of habitat by settlements, by having linear infrastructures. Okay, it means that it cannot cross over to this side. Okay, it means that there is no migration. If I talk about if there is a forest this side also, then it will not cross over the road, or while crossing the road, it will have some kind of accident, right? So if this kind of a thing happens, then migration is lost, and therefore the genes are isolated, and therefore I can have diseases within the elephant population, and that will result into destroying of conservation efforts, right? So linear infrastructure like highways, okay, railways, canal fragments, landscapes, blocking ancient migratory routes and increasing mortality from collisions and electrocution. Okay, even power lines are linear infrastructures, railway lines or your road infrastructure, all of these are linear infrastructures, right? And this is the main cause, like for this particular event also. Then adaptation to human areas, okay, with continuous interaction with the humans, they will develop some kind of adaptation. Okay, that is the crops. There are some crops that they would prefer. Okay, and even if you remove them from the cropped areas and back to the forest, they will come back. Okay, so such kind of adaptations are also there. Okay, a particular example is in Maharashtra, where the leopards, they are called sugar babies. Okay, why? Because they live entirely in the dense sugarcane fields. They have been habituated to that, right? So they become adapted to it. The third thing is that there is climate change impact. Okay, climate change increases the global warming. That means the temperature would increase. That means there would be more water loss, and with respect to more water loss, there would be drying up of water holes within the forest. Okay, even if you give the food within the forested area, the animal will move out because of its thirst, right? So it will go for going out to the village ponds. Okay, moreover, even with respect to the fruits, there would be disrupted seasons. Okay, when it will get ripened and when it can be consumed by the animals, right? Similarly, if we increase the temperature, we talk about the vertical zonation and the latitudinal zonation of vegetation, right? So as it will increase the temperature, it has been observed in Jammu Kashmir that Himalayan brown bears will increasingly descend to lower altitudes due to altered food availability. So this will create two things, one with respect to food and another with respect to water. Okay, drying up of water resources in the forest moves out. With respect to food availability, wherever the temperature is ambient enough for it to get good food, right? Then the fourth thing is population recovery pressures. Okay, all of these are with respect to destroying the areas, resources. Okay, understand this is habitat loss and fragmentation, destroying the resources. Climate change impact, destroying your food availability, destroying your water availability. Adaptation to human areas, it is something that is pulling them towards the human areas. Then fourth thing is an outcome of the conservation process. It means that because I have conserved these animals, there is increase in their densities. Density meaning how many individuals are found in a particular area, right? So these much densities have increased, and because of that there is overspill into human dominated areas as well, right? So this becomes the root cause. These are the four root cause of your conflict. Okay, So what are the government initiatives? Why do we we have some kind of constitutional framework, legal foundation? What are those? So Article 51A Clause G, this talks about fundamental duties. Okay, fundamental duties. Why we are talking about fundamental duties? Because they are two things. One, there are citizens. We are talking about human wildlife conflict. So therefore there is citizens, and then there is wildlife. What is the duty of a citizen with respect to wildlife? That is given in the constitution itself, 51A clause G. It says that every citizen has to protect wildlife and natural environment. Natural environment. Okay, please pay attention to the natural part. Okay, because there is built up environment also, and that is not something that has been mentioned. It is natural environment. Okay, so Supreme Court has recognized that animals have the rights similar to humans, okay, and granted them legal status in landmark judgments, right? The second thing is Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which is the primary legal framework for all kinds of national parks, all kinds of protected area network, right? And there was an amendment also in 2006. There was an amendment that acknowledges wildlife corridors to aid the animal movement and reduce conflict. Okay, understood two things, that wildlife will migrate and humans will be affected. And therefore, a solution to all of this is it is wildlife corridor. Okay, but still this news has occurred, which means that outside the wildlife corridor, it means the population density is so high or habitat fragmentation is so high that they are overspilling even from the protected area networks and also the wildlife corridors that have been created from them, right? Then also in National Wildlife Action Plan, that is goes from 2017 to 13, it focuses on conserving endangered species and habitats while promoting research and existence for understanding what? Coexistence. Okay. We are going from human wildlife conflict to human wildlife coexist, right? Okay, so we have also projects. Okay, Project Tiger is there, Project Elephant is there, 1992, 1973. Okay, TOTR is tigers that are found outside the tiger reserves. Okay, we are conserving, we are already having tiger census every 4 years. Okay, last was in 2022. Okay, so we had huge amount of tiger population developing over the years, but they are also found outside the reserves. What about those tigers? Okay. So elephant corridors, it is preferable that you use a map whenever you are trying to draw it in your mains answers, right? So these are narrow strips of natural habitat. They are forested or vegetated land. They connect larger fragmented wildlife areas, enabling safe passage. Okay, this is something called as right to passage. Right to passage for elephants. It means that it has the rights to migrate. Okay, so West Bengal leads in this elephant corridors. They have 26 corridors. East Central Hub has 35% of all the corridors, and total corridors are identified as 150. Okay, and intrastate we have 84%. Most corridors within the states. Okay, which makes it easier for coordination. Okay, 13% interstate and 6% transnational. Transnational means that we are sharing it with another country. Okay, this tells us how difficult or easy the governance level is. If it is within the state, all the decisions are made by the state governance architecture, right? Okay, so path forward. What is the path forward for comprehensive mitigation of human wildlife conflict? One is landscape level planning. Okay, don't go for isolated understanding of protected area networks. Okay, you must understand it holistically, right? Integrate wildlife considerations into land use planning and infrastructure development. When we are talking about infrastructure, we are talking about that is there a way around this kind of a linear infrastructure? Okay, do we necessarily have to have a road going across the forested area. Okay, so this is a forested area, and if I have a road that goes in between, it means I'm isolating population this and population this, right? And they will not cross over, or if they cross over, then there will be accidents, right? So can we have economically an infrastructure that goes around this forest? Is that a solution? We must try to have it in place. Then land use planning with respect to understanding the crops. Okay, if you have sugarcane, of course that is going to attract the elephants, and also due to the adaptations with respect to the human population. Okay, so can I have something that is not going to attract those animals, right? Then promote interstate coordination as animal movements transcend administrative boundaries. The way we talked about governance framework. Prevention and deterrence. Okay, context specific physical barriers like solar powered fences, trenches and stone walls. Okay, understand this, that if this is a crop field, this is a crop field, then if I have a trench around it, what do you mean by trench? It means that whatever soil contents that you have around the field, those are dug out. Okay, so the elephant cannot cross. Why? Because elephant cannot jump, right? So if they cannot jump, that means they cannot cross over those trenches. Also, there is solar powered fences, that is it will provide with small amount of electric shock. Okay, whenever they try to cross over. Use watchtowers and mobile apps to track animal movements and provide early warnings. Okay, that they can move even if there is some kind of humans who are in in those places, then they can move forward if there are mobile apps to track them. Economic support, compensation schemes to be timely, transparent and reflect the true market value. Right, oftentimes human wildlife conflicts, why does it turn dirty? Because the humans, whoever they are losing with respect to their crops, with respect to their livelihood, with respect to the lives also of their families, they develop some kind of revengeful attitude, right? So they must be compensated. Okay, they must be compensated timely. The transparency of this process must be there, and the market value must be understood, and they should be compensated duly. Okay, otherwise this conflict is going only to snowball. Okay, promote conflict resistant livelihoods like beekeeping, non-palatable horticulture, ecotourism. Okay, this is where we talk about coexistence. We are talking about beekeeping. Okay, almost a lot of times you will see that elephants, because of high powered fences, electric power, because what they will do is they will derive that power from the main line. Okay, and that will deliver a huge shock to the elephant. It will continue, and it will die. The elephant will die, and therefore the solar powered fences is particularly within Prevention of Cruelty Act and Wildlife Protection Act. It is to be of a desired voltage. If you deliver it at a high voltage, this means that the elephant will die. So therefore we can have better methods. Okay, we can have beekeeping. Bees are known to be very efficient to keep the elephants away, right? Non-palatable horticulture machines, don't have sugarcane, try to have chilies. Okay, those kind of crops are ones that will drive the elephants away. Ecotourism, that is, we are also generating revenue, we are also trying to utilize the wildlife that are present in the zone, and we are also encouraging the community to be a part of it. That is your ecotourism, right? Policy reforms, establish permanent district and state level task force, representatives from forest, revenue, agriculture and police departments. Mandate human wildlife conflict impact assessment. It says that we should have, just like we have environmental impact assessment, just like we have social impact assessment, we should also have human wildlife conflict impact assessment integrated within the policies. Right? Community engagement, that is, involve the people that are around, that is through village level committees. Okay. Okay, moving on to the next part. We have nature-based solutions. Okay, nature-based solutions. So recently, what has happened that we always have conference of parties under United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. Okay, Conference of Parties is the debate between the developed, most of the times between the developed and the developing nations, about who should cut down their carbon emissions. Okay, on the sidelines, what has happened is it is going to happen in COP30 in Belém, and they have started talking about nature-based solutions. Okay, nature-based solutions means that it is something derived out of, understood out of natural ecosystems, and we are trying to deploy it to try to address any kind of adverse effects of climate change, right? So within this, let us try to understand what is nature-based solution. So it is a strategic action designed to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural or modified ecosystems, right? It means that it will provide for protection, sustainable management, which means that we are comparing these kind of solutions. When we talk about climate change effects, we are talking about solutions, we talk about technology transfer, we talk about how much technology improvements must be done to counter the adverse effects. The second thing we talk about is finance, how much money is to be there. But when we talk about nature-based solutions, it means it is being mimicked according to the nature. Okay, so we have sustainable management and also restoration. Okay, so one of the very good examples is Pichavaram mangroves. Okay, so there was tsunami in 2004. Okay, that led to wide scale destruction. Okay, and it was these mangroves that were planted. Okay, they were protected. Tamil Nadu, yes, in the Tamil Nadu zone. So here it is in this part. Okay, so you will have Avicennia, Rhizophyra. Okay, these are the mangroves. Mangroves meaning they are halophytic. They will house halophytic plants that are salt tolerant. Okay, they have special mechanisms with respect to salt concentration. Okay, they will exclude the salt concentration that is present in the marine ecosystem through their roots. They will filter it out, and they will also filter it out through their leaves. Okay, so if you touch their leaves, you will find that salt concentration is over there, right? So this is a very powerful example. Okay, how it helps to, with respect to technology or with respect to finances, we would have developed certain kind of walls, or we would have developed certain kind of technology, but this is a nature-based solution, right? It is not very expensive also. So what it will do, it will address social challenges. Okay, target climate change, flooding, water security, food security, and urban heat through ecological interventions. Okay, then it also involves full community engagement. Okay, it is because the land use pattern will change. Okay, so the people community who is existing there, they will also have to consent to it, and they will also have to actively participate. Okay, understand that whenever we are trying to have some kind of solutions, it must be acceptable at the grassroots level. Unless it is acceptable, it becomes a top down policy, and that never works. Okay, it will work only in certain cases, but this is not one of that case, right? Then land scale application, that is integrated approach towards sectors and policies, and not isolated projects with adaptive management. Okay, in the first two news also, we have talked about it being a landscape project. Okay, understanding everything in entirety. Okay, we cannot have isolated solutions, right? So we have types of nature-based interventions. Okay, so we have with respect to terrestrial solutions. What are the solutions? Afforestation or reforestation. Okay, we have Miyawaki method. Have you heard of that? Miyawaki method. It relates to urban forestry. Okay, especially for example near Sabarmati river, the riverfront is there, and they have tried to have a very small area which will have dense plantations. Okay, and these will be of different tree species. Okay, combination of trees, shrubs, herbs, and everything. Okay, so this is your Miyawaki method. Okay, that is devoting a small amount of land to highly dense plants, right? So what it will do, it will increase the retention of moisture in soil and also the local air quality. Then marine and coastal, like we studied about mangrove restoration. Okay, India has a scheme, okay, MISTI scheme, that is for mangroves only, mangroves restoration. Okay, it acts as a protection against the cyclones. Why? Right? And also stores blue carbon. Whatever carbon that is being stored, okay, oceans will absorb the different types of carbon. Okay, that is also one of the reasons for ocean acidification, right? So blue carbon is also absorbed due to such kind of mangroves. Okay, mangroves are what? They are transition zone between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. They are adapted to both the kind of conditions. Then agricultural systems, agroforestry and natural farming. Agroforestry means that you will have trees as well as the crops, right? So zero budget natural farming and PM Pranab. These are the interventions that the government has put forward. Blue green networks, that is your urban infrastructure. We talk about urban island effect. Urban island effect, because the cities will have increased use of concrete. That is why the rainwater, even if it falls, it will get washed off. It will not percolate to the groundwater. Okay, that is why urban spaces are called concrete jungles. Okay, and when we have such kind of restoring of urban wetlands, okay, especially having water bodies within the cities, then that will cool the local temperature by 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. Right? It will reduce the urban island effect. Right? So within this COP30 that is being hosted by Brazil in Belém and within the Amazon rainforest, so this was there in ACT. Okay, it stands for enhancing nature-based solution for an accelerated climate transformation. Accelerated climate transformation, right? It is transformative global collaboration, and it was there in COP27. It finds its origin here. Okay, out of this 1 billion, the global targets within this that they have planned is that 1 billion people would be protected and 2.4 billion hectares would be secured with nature-based solutions. Okay, but the problem is that funding. Okay, although nature-based solutions require lower amount of funding as compared to the technologically or financing gaps that are there, they are more expensive, but still the funding is not available. Okay, that is, we will see here. Okay, close financing gap. First, let us see the strategic importance for India. Okay, why does India need to follow this nature-based solution or not? Of course it does, right? So we have climate change mitigation. Climate change requires what? That you have carbon dioxide emissions or carbon dioxide equivalent, right? These kind of emissions are there, that is leading to global warming, and therefore if I have sequestration, that is storage of carbon into oceans or into with respect to biomass or oceans, then that is the best way forward. Okay, that means that I can devote that kind of carbon dioxide emissions to more of my welfare projects, right? So deforestation, countering deforestation, 12 to 15% contribution to national emissions. This means that if I have mangroves in place, then even if I'm losing out 12 to 15% of carbon emissions due to deforestation. Okay, deforestation is done for the purpose of economic activities, for example mining, right? So these can be countered with nature-based solutions. Then disaster risk reduction. Okay, these tsunamis, okay, cyclones that will cause huge amount of disasters, huge amount of damages to lives and property. So that can be also reduced, and not something with a heavily technologically enabled system. Then water security. Okay, riparian buffers and watershed protection, filter pollutants and secure supplies for 600 million Indians. Okay, understand that management of resources is very important. Okay, just because you have a resource, for example if you have water, okay, but in some zones you will have water surplus, while in some zones it will be deficit. This means that the persons here will face the problems of drinking water as well as agriculture. People here will face the problem of flooding, right? So this means that the resource is there, but I have to manage it well also. Okay, so water security, whenever I'm trying to go for nature based solution, it will try to accumulate. For example, where there is deficit, it will try to maintain. Okay, where there is surplus, it will try to maintain, right? Then urban health, we talked about urban heat island. Okay, so green corridors improve public health and connect fragmented habitats, urban areas housing over 520 million people. Okay, it provide essential ecosystem services, reduce air pollution, lower stress levels, and in dense metropolitan environments, right? So what happens is that there is concrete and then there is asphalt. Concrete is used in your building material. Okay, asphalt is used in roads. Asphalt is dark in color. Now what happens is that these two combination, what will happen that they become absorbers of heat. They become absorbers of heat. Okay, and also the surface area is also increased. Why surface area is increased? Because I have high-rise buildings. Okay, huge amount of roads. Okay, so this means there is greater absorption of heat, right? And this is during the daytime. And during the nighttime, what will happen? These will be emitted, radiated by these buildings, right? Heat radiation will take place. But we have various kinds of heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems also. Okay, because there is so much of high rise of temperature, therefore people will use this air conditioning things, right? That will accumulate the heat within the environment without letting it escape. Okay, moreover, there would be buildings that will stop any kind of wind flow. Okay, if you have high rise buildings, the wind flow will not be there. That means the heat will not be dissipated. It means it will accumulate and it will create what kind of a graph? We are talking about if this is a rural area, if this is an urban area, if this is again a rural area, then temperatures will be seen like this. It will rise in the urban area. That is what is isolating it. That is what your urban island effect is. Right? So these are strategically important. So suppose, we have, if I have a pond here, that will accumulate, that will absorb more amount of heat, okay, than it dissipates, right? Okay, so what are the pathways? Pathways is, sabse pehle, first of all, we should have annual financing gap that must be closed. That stands at $384 billion by 2025. Okay, and also one thing that is very, very important from the point of view of sustainable development, that we are demanding more, that humanity's demand exceeds Earth's regenerative capacity by 70%. What does this mean? That Earth can produce resources for us to consume at a certain cycle. But if we try to deplete those resources before it can regenerate itself, then it is going to be, we are going to come at a stage where we are overshooting, right? That is what you have as Earth Overshoot Day. What it means is that after, whatever resources were present for this particular year, till when did the resources actually last due to human utilization? Okay, so it has been said that it has been decreasing, and by August, such overshoot day is observed, right? So first is close the financing gap. Okay, there must be contribution with respect to finances. Mainstream policy, that is nature-based solutions must enter into core sectors, and the biodiversity should be elevated to board level strategic priority for corporations. That is, just like we have ESG norms, okay, just like we have environmental norms to be implemented within the governance of corporates as well as the government bodies, we should also have NBS within that policy as well. Okay, inclusive governance, that is, we must have grassroots participation. Okay, because even if we have these kind of solutions, nature-based solutions in place, it is only with respect to the community participation that it will be conserved, right? Technology monitoring. Okay, understanding that these can be uprooted. Deploy AI-driven dashboards and Bhuvan portal. This will help you with respect to satellite imagery. Okay, real-time tracking of restoration success. Right. Now, next important news, it is with understanding of ecology and ecosystem. Okay, and particularly aquatic ecosystem. Okay. So we have sponges. It has been recently observed that sponges are nature's heavy metal filters. Okay. So first of all, we have to understand what are sponges. Okay. Not exactly coral reefs. Coral reefs are of different phylum. Okay, phylum is the organization with respect to the animals, with respect to their morphological features. Corals are phylum Nidaria. Okay, these are coral polyps that you know, right? Coral polyps will have symbiotic interaction with algae, that is called zooxanthellae. All right, and sponges are phylum Porifera. Okay, different phylums, right? So it is because their structures, morphological features are different. Okay. So what has happened? It has said that the freshwater sponges in Sundarban Delta, it has been found that it is important as two things. One, it is important as bioindicator. What does this mean? And bioremediation. Okay. These two things make it very important in the news. Hmm. Hmm. If there is increase in pollutant concentration within an ecosystem, then these would be the ones to respond. Okay, that is, you can collect these sponges, you can dissect their tissues and understand how much pollution concentration is there in their tissues. Okay, that is why it will serve as a bioindicator. The second thing is bioremediation. That is, it also acts as a biological agent in removal of those heavy metals. Okay, so these dual purposes. So bioindicator is something like when the disaster is going to occur, I know through my early warning system that such kind of a disaster will take place. So these are bioindicators, basically meaning early warning systems of ecosystem. That is, I can save. Okay. So there would be some organisms that would be resilient like sponges, but there would be some organisms that would also be affected because they are very sensitive. They are sensitive to increasing temperature gradient or increasing pollutant gradient, right? So that is why bioindicators become early warning systems, right? Now sponges, as I said, it belongs to phylum Porifera, oldest multicellular organisms with fossils dating back up to 600 million years. This means it is very ancient. Okay, and understand this about ancient organisms, that they will not have true tissues and organs. That is, it will not have a structure, right? So they will have adaptations. Okay, one of the adaptations is through filter feeding. What is filter feeding? You have seen these pores of, right? These pores are there. What it will do? It will intake a lot of water. Okay, lot of water will be it will intake around thousands of liters in a day. Okay, and within its tissues, within its physical entrapments will be there that will these pores, by the way, these pores are called ostia. Okay, as these water will pass through these, there would be physical entrapment of the pollutants. Okay, and there would be a symbiosis. You have your symbiotic interaction, because there would be some kind of bacteria along with these pores. Okay, so these bacteria, what they will do? They will break down the heavy metals. They will break down the heavy metals concentration, and through this process, it will create bioremediation. Okay, so specialized cells are there that will trap bacteria, planktons, and organic particles that are necessary for its food, and also because of symbiotic association with the bacteria, that will filter out, that will decrease the concentration of heavy metals. Okay, or reduce them to more simpler substances that can be absorbed by the ecosystem. Okay, so this is the process. Like it will intake water, then there would be metal adsorption. Okay, toxic metal ions, that is, it will get physically entrapped. Okay, so this is also something like a nature-based solution, right? So what will happen is bioaccumulation. Bioaccumulation with respect to understanding that it occurs increasing toxic metal concentration only when respect to one organism. Okay, so sponges will concentrate heavy metals like arsenic, lead, cadmium at levels far exceeding the surrounding water concentrations. And then there would be bioremediation, where they will actively remove and sequester pollutants, cleaning the environment. And this is through their symbiotic microbial communities. Okay, don't need to remember the name of the bacteria. Just that UPSC may ask this symbiotic interaction, right? So they may ask that sponges have symbiotic interaction through which the bioremediation process occurs. Okay. So just to understand, like if we have the bioindicator, if we have the bioremediation process, then what are the water regions that have heavy metal crisis across Indian regions? Okay, first understand what is heavy metals. Heavy metals are with high atomic weights, and their densities will be exceeding 5 gram per centimeter cube. So these are defined as heavy metals, right? So they persist. Why they are particularly difficult for us? Because they persist in the ecosystem indefinitely and accumulate through food chains, and they remain toxic even in trace amounts. Okay, when we study about pollutants, we say that up until a particular threshold, only up until particular threshold, a pollutant is not regarded. Okay, there is a threshold beyond which it is regarded as a pollutant. Okay, that is why we have primary pollutants, and then we also talk about secondary pollutants. But these are the ones that are toxic even in trace amounts. Even in small amounts, it will be very toxic, right? And they will persist. Okay, they will not flush themselves out of the environment, right? So you have this region, West Bengal and Bihar, key contaminants arsenic, cadmium. Okay, Punjab, you will have selenium, uranium, barium. Okay, you understand this. In Rajasthan also you will have uranium, high uranium concentrations. You will have uranium concentrations in the wells of Rajasthan. Okay, it will exploit, it will but deplete the kind of groundwater resources you have. It will contaminate them. Uttar Pradesh, Cr6, that is hexavalent, chromium, arsenic, lead. Arsenic is very important, okay, because understanding arsenic, we understand how it is contaminating groundwater also, particularly in the Gangetic Delta, okay, Gangetic plains. Madhya Pradesh, mercury and industrial pollutants. Odisha, iron, industrial heavy metals. And Delhi NCR, you will have increased amount of lead and aluminium, right? These are the health effects. This is also given like in your environment books, so you can refer to that. Okay, so one important thing that we have to see is that the concept that is related to this news is understanding the difference between bioaccumulation and biomagnification. What is the difference?
The concentration of the pollutant goes through the generations.
Not generations, it goes through the trophic levels. Okay, when we are talking about bioaccumulation, it is only with respect to one organism. Okay, so when we are talking about sponges, we are talking about bioaccumulation. But once it is being consumed by higher order fishes, then it is increasing, then it is called biomagnification. Okay, this is the only difference that we have. That is increasing concentration of the pollutant within the body of the organism. That is bioaccumulation, and once it is eaten by the higher order in the food chain, then it becomes biomagnification, right? So it becomes a natural solution, like we talked about nature-based solutions. This also becomes a natural solution to the growing crisis. One, because of its potential to indicate before any kind of mishap happens. Then bioremediation agents, because it can clean it up also. Cleans because of symbiotic interaction. Very important. Okay. And then future applications can be found for deploying sponge-based monitoring and remediation. Monitoring and remediation in contaminated regions. Let us try to introduce them in contaminated regions so that they will perform both of these dual functions. Right? Then coming to the last part, rhino dehorning as a conservation strategy. Okay, from time to time we will have different kinds of conservation efforts. Okay, we will try to understand what is the reason behind them being poached, behind them being hunted. Okay, for rhinos, understanding that this is the reason. Horns. Okay, so these horns become particularly important for the ones that are hunting rhinos. Okay, they are sold because they consider it to have what? Medicinal properties. Medicinal properties, and also it is sold for a symbol. It is a symbol for status. These two things are there. Okay, that is why what will happen is they will kill the rhinoceros and they will extract the horn out of it. Okay. But recently it has been seen in Africa that dehorning means cutting away the horn, will lead to reduced risk of a rhino to get poached, to get hunted, to get killed, right? Why do you think the poachers, they did not, think of this idea and cut the horn? Why they have to kill it? Right? Even they can cut it and they can also. It is because it is, it goes deep inside. And they are not, because these are very, very expensive, they are going to extract the whole of it. That will lead to its death. Okay, if they cut it, then it will not be as expensive. Okay, and it becomes very difficult to hunt down a rhino and then have this extraction, right? So dehorning is that they are capturing them, okay, the African reserves, they are capturing them and they are cutting down the horns. Okay, this means that it is decreasing the risk of death due to being hunted, right? So the truth is that it is entirely, truth is that it is not a bone, it is matted hair. Okay, horn is not a bone, that is a bone extension out of the rhino on its face. It is matted hair because it has components of protein. That is, it is entirely made of keratin that has components of protein that is found in human hair and fingernails, not in bone, right? They have no medicinal properties. Okay, it is only as status symbols, and it is also said that it is a myth. Okay, because multiple researches have happened, but they have found no any kind of medicine benefits from these. Okay. So, but it is a lucrative criminal enterprise. Why? Because 2012 to 2022, people believing that they have some kind of traditional medicinal properties, they have started demanding it, and therefore its trade has generated about 874 billion to 1.13 billion US dollars. Okay, and that is why this kind of a trafficking is rampant, right? Now this becomes a cost-effective solution because there has been observed that in the African reserves 78% reduction in poaching. Okay, 95% lower individual risk. That means how much risk does an individual rhino have with respect to its horn being cut? Is it going to be poached? So the risk is reduced by 95%. Okay, and this occurs at a very fractional budget cost, just 1.2%. Okay, budget was 100%, only 1.2% devoted, and all the horns were cut, and you reduce the risk by this many percent. Okay, so it becomes a very cost effective solution, right? But with respect to India also, India Rhino Vision 2020 we have, right? So even India's model is very successful, because in the last few years we had only one or two rhinos that were killed. Okay, that too, they say it was due to some accident, right? And Assam will have the maximum population of rhinos. Okay, Kaziranga National Park, that will have maximum number of rhinos. It is known as the rhino capital of the world, and the park has lost only 1 to 2 rhinos over past 3 years. What is the reason for its success? The reason is governance. A strong governance framework. Okay, a strong governance framework that integrates what kind of things? Smart patrolling technologies. Okay, that they will identify where these rhinos are, and accordingly they will deploy their technologies. There would be meaningful community participation, and there would be efficient human wildlife conflict mitigation. Okay, that means even the community at the grassroots level is participating to avoid such kind of mishaps. Okay, avoid such kind of problems. One important thing that I should mention with respect to this news is RODIS. Okay, so we have talked we know about the criminals with respect to the society. Okay, there is forensic tracing of those kind of criminals. There is another thing that is named as Rhino DNA index system. It is basically the evidence that is derived from the forensics itself, and understanding from their horns that is derived, and from their dung, whatever DNA samples are collected, it is utilized and stored in this RODIS. Okay, that is Rhino DNA index system, and it is used to track. Okay, it enables investigators to trace illegal trade networks, link seized horns to specific poached animals, and strengthen the prosecution of wildlife criminals. Okay, basically trying to put the criminals to book who have been involved in poaching, right? So this is all for today. Okay, thank you so much.